Currently in beta, Kritika Online is an action-based instanced MMORPG developed by En and published by En Masse Entertainment. The game has a Korean version as well as a mobile version called Kritika the White Knights, which was developed by Gameville. My main fear when going into Kritika was that this would simply be a crappy mobile port. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. After playing both the mobile version and the North American beta, I can safely say that apart from sharing characters and instances, the games are different in almost every way. En's only other title is Lunia Z, which shut down its global servers on the 1st of January 2014. The North American version of Kritika Online is going to feature many differences from its Korean counterpart, including a reworked rest point system, which in the Korean version completely prevented you from playing once used. I'm Lorenzo, and this is the Endgame. Kritika Online currently features 4 characters, each of which has 2 to 3 subclasses that unlock at level 15. I say characters and not classes because that's exactly what they are. The characters are gender locked and have limited customization. This leaves all characters looking almost the same except for costumes, which I'll talk about later. The current classes available are the Warrior, a close-range tanky character that uses swords to bash, slash, and crush enemies with sheer strength and brutality. The Rogue, a close-range speedster character that decimates enemies with dual daggers and enormous combos. The Reaper, a close to mid-range character that changes entirely depending on the subclass, going from an AoE-based vampire class to a stance-based Valkyrie class. And my favorite, the Gun Mage, a mid to long-range gunslinger that uses magic to do everything from summoning giant shadow demons to manipulating space and time. The characters' classes are fairly diverse, and each character has a well-rounded kit, allowing it to solo dungeons with ease if need be. However, you benefit highly from playing in a party. Each member in your party grants you increased XP gains as well as friend points to buy special items, so long as the party members are in your friends list. Being an action combat game, basic attacks are used with your left and right mouse buttons, with skills being assigned to 1 through 5 and F1 through F4. You do have skills that are activated with letter keys, however if you don't feel like having to hit H or Y during a boss fight, you can remap your action bar to any key you want. The main issue with the combat system, however, is that I personally think it feels floaty, and at times unresponsive. Enemies feel like punching bags, and certain abilities lock you into them until you either finish it or cancel out with a jump. A good example would be Rapid Fire for Shadow Mage. When you activate the ability, you shoot a certain amount of shots at the enemy with your left click. Problem is, you can't use any other skill until you've either cancelled out by jumping or used up all of your shots. There's so much going on at once during combat that it's easy to lose count of your shots or not see that your character is still in rapid fire stance. I would have much preferred for your current ability to be cancelled the moment you use another one, which would have made more sense for a fast-paced action system. There's also a consistent lack of challenge in the game, and rather than introducing new mechanics or smarter AI at higher difficulties, the game simply adds 30 or 40 more health bars to bosses, and gives bosses the ability to 2 or 3 shot you. To be honest, this artificial difficulty feels like a cheap tactic more so than anything substantial. On top of that, in order to revive during a dungeon, you have to use a revive stone. If your party members want to revive you, they have to use a stone as well. Every day, the game provides you with 3 stones. All other stones must be purchased from the cash shop, bought with friend points, or farmed from elite bosses unlocked with pages found throughout the dungeons later on. These elite bosses are definitely worth fighting. They generally drop 1 to 2 revival stones, gold critium for crafting legendaries, and 5% XP towards your next level. But considering each elite boss costs 10 pages to fight, you'll likely want to save them up until you're higher level, at which point bosses are going to drop more stones and gold critium. That being said, I haven't even discussed the player economy yet. Most of what I'm going to mention may change when the game is released, however currently, trading isn't allowed in the game. According to the publisher, this is to prevent bots and gold sellers. On top of the lack of trading, certain auction house items cost cred, the game's real money currency. Gear can only be sold or bought with cred. whereas most crafting materials and things such as elite boss pages can be bought and sold for gold. This feels blatantly pay to win, which is odd considering the in-game shop mainly sells convenience items and grey tier costume sets. Now, it could be argued that you can just sell gear in order to get more cred, but someone somewhere still has to buy that cred, and either way, you're still buying power with real money. I personally disapprove, but it really depends on how you see it, and whether or not it's something you're personally okay with. If we talk about costumes though, as I said, the cash shop only offers grey tier bundles. You can get costumes without spending money by using badges instead. However, the aesthetic of the costume is randomized. Although costumes do provide you with some stats, all costumes have the same stats regardless of aesthetic, or if you used cred to purchase them. The main thing about costumes, however, is that you can equip them with sigils that give them better stats and allow you to upgrade them to the following tier. Grey sigils have no stats, but once you equipped 9 costume pieces with sigils and upgraded your gear to the green tier, you can use green sigils which do have stats. This is a good mechanic in my opinion, that gives purpose to costumes. All of these costumes and sigils are purchased with badges, which are mainly earned through arenas, which are unlocked at level 60, and daily dungeons. Arenas are essentially boss challenge modes where you fight 10 bosses one after the other without any potions available to you. It's a really fun mode, and each boss you defeat grants you medals, which you use to buy badges for your costumes. Your run times and score is also recorded and ranked, and at the end of each week you get extra badges based on how well you did. Rank 1, for example, gets 600 badges and a set of wings with really good stats. Daily dungeons, on the other hand, are basically small boss maps with different mechanics each day. There's a total of 5 daily dungeons, with the available dungeon changing every day. During Saturdays and Sundays, however, all dungeons are available to you. Arenas can only be done 3 times a day, and daily dungeons can be done twice a day. Overall, however, I feel as though the game lacks content variety until around level 60, which might deter players from powering through. In fact, your first 30 to 40 levels are almost exclusively story dungeon runs, and it's not until level 50 that you unlock Awakened and EX abilities. Awakened abilities essentially means you increase the power of your abilities. This can mean simply adding 50% power, changing the mechanics of an ability, or adding more attacks to that ability. Your EX abilities, on the other hand, completely change your abilities, and have to be charged up with your EX counter through combat in order to be used. As for gear customization and enhancements, your options are gear enhancements, gear sockets, and charms. From what I understand, charms provide your gear with elemental bonuses that stack to provide you with passive and active bonuses, which is definitely an interesting mechanic. Overall, although gear customization is somewhat limited, I feel it does the job it's meant to perfectly fine. The story is honestly Kritika's worst aspect. It's practically non-existent, and what little story the game does have is cheesy and uninteresting. From what I can gather, someone named Abelard manipulated the population into making him king by using false promises. And when he became king, he started using Critium-powered machines to wage war on the world, as he wanted the world to bow to him. And now, you have to stop him. Maybe the game explains at some point who Abelard is, what his motives are, and what his true goal is. However, honestly, I cared so little by that point that I just skipped any and all dialogue presented to me. It felt like a waste of time. A good story with great cutscenes could have made this game so much more interesting. Unfortunately, not only are there no cutscenes, but all stories presented to you through uninteresting NPC quest dialogue. One of my biggest issues with Kritika, aside from the story, is the leveling experience. Although it starts off well enough, by the time you hit level 15 or 20, you'll be replaying the same dungeon 3 or 4 times to complete quests. It's very, very repetitive. For whatever reason, the game likes to provide you with new content as slowly as it possibly can. When playing with a group of friends, the repetitiveness of dungeons isn't too bad, but it's unbearable when playing solo. Your entire leveling experience will be get quests in the hub, kill a few punching bags in a dungeon, turn in quests, get more, replay the same dungeon. To top this all off, the game has a rest point system. You have a total of 300 rest points that refill each day at 6 AM. From 201 to 300, you'll earn the full amount of experience from dungeons. From 101 to 200, you'll earn 50% experience. And from 0 to 100, you'll earn 1/10 of your normal XP. Each dungeon will cost you between 6 and 8 rest points to complete and take about 3 to 5 minutes. That's anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour of leveling before you start earning 50%, and another 40 minutes to an hour before you're at 10%. Although I'm happy that unlike the Korean version you can still play once you run out of rest points, I wish this system wasn't included in the game at all. Imagine getting on with a group of friends on your day off, and having to stop playing after 2 or 3 hours because there's simply no point in continuing. Needless to say, I hope they remove this system. And no, dying before ending a dungeon doesn't give you back your rest points. However, you don't spend your rest points when you go into the dungeon. Instead, each area in the dungeon costs a single rest point. Honestly, there's very little to say about the leveling as it stands. The variety of content is practically non-existent, and the rest points seem to only be there to make the game seem longer and more time-consuming. PvP in Kritika is fairly enjoyable. It's not quite as good as, say, Blade and Soul, but it's definitely an enjoyable experience. More so than the solo content. There are currently 4 modes of PvP. A general 1v1 ranked mode that features a best of 3 combat round, a 3v3 team battle mode, a capture the flag game, and an avatar war mode, which as far as I can understand is a MOBA style game where you have to destroy the enemy team's warbots. Unfortunately, the only matches I got to play in PvP were 1v1, and as it stands, there's no quick match, only a lobby. Each win in PvP will increase your ranking and your PvP score for that season. There's currently no rewards for the preseason, however I assume there's going to be rewards later on that will resemble that of the arena. Badges, costumes, etc. The main issue I had with the PvP is the fact that it doesn't seem to normalize your gear levels. If you're higher level and have a higher combat rating, you'll almost always do better than your enemy. That's not to say it's impossible to beat a stronger enemy, but the fight is definitely in their favor. This is an odd choice for a game that's trying to have a competitive PvP arena. If you're not going to normalize gear and levels like Guild Wars 2 does, then you definitely need a quick matching system that pairs you up with enemies of your combat rating. Another issue I have with the PvP is the fact that stun locking is essentially a death sentence. As a level 65 Shadow Mage, anyone that I managed to stun lock into one of my combos would either die instantly or lose 3/4 of their health bar and be forced to use their combo break ability. I would have definitely preferred for stun locking to be kept at a minimum in PvP matches, forcing players to constantly be on their toes. Without the ability to stun lock enemies, you'd be forced to constantly keep moving and utilize small but effective combos to ensure that your enemy doesn't counterattack. I'm not saying stun locking is bad, but being able to stun lock indefinitely is certainly an odd choice. I unfortunately don't see the PvP being reason enough to dedicate time into this game unless certain changes are made. There's no PvP gear or PvP only abilities, so although the PvP is enjoyable, it's fairly bare bones, and feels somewhat slapped on at this point. In fact, the main reason why it's enjoyable is likely the combat system more so than the actual PvP mechanics being fleshed out properly. Starting at levels 50 and 60, the game gets more fleshed out, although not by a lot. At level 50, you get the Awakening and EX abilities I mentioned earlier, and at level 60, you gain access to the Arena Boss Challenge mode. However, at level 65, you'll gain access to the Starhenge Hub. It's strongly recommended to play the maps in this area with a party of 4, as the difficulty increase is insane. The good thing, however, is that rest points no longer matter the way they used to. As you're fully leveled up, you no longer earn XP from maps or quests. Instead, you now use quests to earn Ether Force. which is used to increase your character's stats, such as attack, defense, health, elemental attributes, etc. The rest points you use in dungeons are instead added towards a devotion counter that provides all your characters with a buff. In my opinion, this is a good use of the rest point system, and that's all it should have been from the beginning. The daily quests in this area will also earn you keystone fragments. 30 of these fragments can be turned into a hero key, which are used to craft legendary gear. 30 of these keys are required to craft a single legendary weapon, which apparently takes at least a week of grinding according to my guild. Now, I can understand making top tier gear this difficult to obtain. However, I didn't see any other ways to progress your gear aside from saving up gold to craft a full set of level 55 legendaries and enhancing it. Unfortunately, there aren't too many different routes of progression at endgame. You get your dailies, you grind the 4 endgame maps over and over again until you can finally craft new gear, likely to run higher difficulty arenas. Although this linear progression likely appeals to some people, it doesn't appeal to me. The endgame is simply more grinding for the sake of grinding, rather than earning anything substantial. You grind to get more power, so you can grind harder maps to get even more power. Although the content itself is fun at first, it stops being fun when you realize it's all that's available to you. Gear-wise, you'll unlock the ability to equip power cores and artifacts, both of which provide stat bonuses. Power cores are straight up attack power bonuses that grant you insane amounts of attack, but have to be recharged with critium you earn from salvaging gear. Artifacts, on the other hand, can be anything from attack boost, percent increase to stats, elemental stat bonuses, etc. Overall, I found the endgame to be very underwhelming. While I was expecting a slew of new content, I was instead greeted by a couple new maps, and a few new gear slots and mechanics that overall make little difference other than just increasing your power. The best way I could describe Kritika is that it's fun. It's by no means a good game, but I wouldn't describe it as a bad game either. The main issue is the lack of content and the repetitiveness of dungeons. The main gameplay, however, is enjoyable with a group of friends, but feels more like a time waster than a long-term MMORPG I'd want to dedicate my time towards. It's a game with a large amount of potential that unfortunately remains uncared for. There's very little to say about this game. It's average in almost every way, and I think it's fair to say that it's not worth powering through to endgame. If the early leveling content does appeal to you, you can definitely expect more of it during endgame. Otherwise, however, there likely isn't much here for you. There's better dungeon action RPGs, better PvP games, and better MMOs out there worth your time. So should you play it? I suppose that depends on what you're looking for. However, I'd say it's worth a look, but not much else. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out my other endgame videos. I currently have 3 more endgame videos planned for the next month or 2, and if you want to support my channel, consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon. Discord links will be in the comment section below as well if you'd like to come talk to me. I'll see you next time.